Hey everyone, welcome back to the Teikametrics World Headquarters here in Boston. It is 3 p.m. here on January 11th. Welcome to the 13th episode, lucky number 13, episode of TeikaTV. So today we're excited to talk to everyone about keyword discovery and how you find those keywords for your sponsored products campaigns. So a ton of great content to go through with the team here. So my name is Joe Dube. I'll be the host today, and I'm lucky to be joined by Meghan, who should look familiar to all of you who have tuned in before.
Hey everyone, I'm Meghan, and I'm part of the customer success team, worked with hundreds of sellers, as have Joe and Pat.
Yeah, and making his TeikaTV debut, we have Pat Halloran.
Yeah, hey guys, I'm Pat. I've been with Teikametrics for about 1.5 years, and I work very close with the customer success and the sales team here.
Awesome.
Happy to be here.
Great. So as everyone is joining, we are going to cover a few topics we've seen in the headlines this week, and then we'll dive into some of the content. So it's been interesting to see the headline around Amazon's going to be $1 trillion business. What do you think?
It's a lot of zeros, Joe.
It sure is. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you see that the stock price has gone above $1,000, above $1,200, and the projections are just continuous growth. One of the areas specifically is advertising.
Oh yeah, I know we had a big discussion around this in the earnings call and
right.
One of our first couple TeikaTVs, and I think that just supports the fact that Amazon is really investing time and energy, and just a lot of sellers are going towards advertising. And what this means is that even with that growing, you should really be getting involved in that because they're expanding those opportunities.
Right, and yeah, as everyone is joining us today, please drop in a like, a comment, let us know where you're joining in from, and drop in any questions as they come up. We want to keep this interactive for everyone on the feed. So yeah, I mean, thinking more about that how they get to be $1 trillion business, it's interesting when you think Amazon is just under half of all e-commerce. I think the latest number I saw was like 42% of all online sales are happening through Amazon, but they're only doing 10% of online advertising. So Google and Facebook are obviously the huge elephants in the room there on the advertising world, but it just goes to show if Amazon's doing nearly half of the sales, there's a ton of opportunity for more advertising.
I mean, especially with Google, they have the AdWords platform there, and Amazon sponsored products is really modeled after that. So I see them really getting a lot more specific with the features they're releasing for sellers, especially the third-party side there.
Yeah, they're definitely behind in terms of maturity, the Google platform, and there's just a huge ecosystem behind that. I mean, the Amazon API for sponsored products came out just about 1.5 years ago, so it's all relatively new, and companies like ourselves have been able to build software to help sellers optimize on the sponsored product side. And I'll have Robbie, our executive producer, drop in that link to get a free trial. So if you are a seller interested in learning more about our platform, there's a free 30-day trial. You can test it out and see how it works for you. So with all that growth in Amazon, another big headline that was of particular interest to us was that HQ2 concept of where Amazon's going to land for their second big headquarters. It looks like it may be Boston.
Yeah, I mean, there was over 200 cities that applied, and it's getting down to the nitty-gritty, and it's really exciting because they're looking at office space.
Yeah, so we saw there's an article in the Boston Globe today that there's going to be, they were looking at like 500,000 square feet out our window, right over there. So it'll be interesting to see where they end up. But that's of particular interest to us, and they could be our neighbors come 2019.
Very exciting.
So yeah, thanks for everyone who's joining us. It looks like Mikey is joining us from North Carolina. Hey, Mikey. We got our biggest fan, Dan, throwing down that TeikaTV hashtag. Love seeing that coming in each week. Hello, Mike. Yeah, so I think we can get right into the content today. So we want to talk about keyword discovery. So when you're a seller and you're setting up those campaigns, we've walked through what that structure should look like. We talked a little bit about bidding strategies last week. But we wanted to cover that keyword discovery. What's the best way to get those keywords into your campaigns?
I mean, there's so many, and this is actually a huge huge question we get from a lot of sellers.
Yeah.
Do I, use those tools out there? Am I using my own search term data? And, we really want to dive into the pros and cons in all of them because they really work differently for all sellers. So
Right.
I think a big one is those external keyword tools.
Yeah, so that's the first one we can talk about is those third-party keyword tools. There's a bunch of free ones out there, some really cheap options where you can enter in specific terms and get a dump of thousands of search terms, right?
Yeah, we see sellers pick out that main keyword, that browsing keyword, and putting it into those free tools where you can actually look at the search volume.
Yeah.
And that's what they're looking for especially.
Yeah, and so if you're a seller on the line with us here today, and if you've used any of those external third-party keyword tools, drop a 1 into the comments. We'd be interested to see who out there has used that before and what type of success you've found. So if you've used a third-party tool, drop a 1 in the comments and let us know if you've done that before. Hello to Pat joining us from Jeffersonville, Indiana. Hey Pat, thanks for joining. So yeah, there's that option out there, and it's sort of attractive when you're first getting started because it can give you such a huge list, but there's a ton of risk there too, right?
Yeah, so I know, Pat, we've seen a lot with people using these tools. They'll first enter these keywords just to kind of get a start, especially in their manual campaigns.
Yeah.
What do you find with these kind of generic high search volume keywords?
Yeah, I mean, it can immediately get you traction if you're looking to not wait for an automatic campaign to mature and get those keywords that are pulling directly from your campaigns. I mean, you can get that traction, but the risk is, I mean, these are the highest volume search terms on Amazon for that specific topic.
Right.
And it may not be profitable for you. The cost there just may not kind of work out with what your business goals are. So that is, there are some risks there. With that.
Would you say that's like a longer tail or shorter tail strategy there?
Yeah, it's more shorter tailed. I mean, that's going to kind of give you those basic terms. And then from that, if you're using, different match types, you can start to find those longer tailed, search terms for you. But there are definitely some risks there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there saying how because they're the highest volume terms, that means they're probably the most expensive and they're going to get the most amount of clicks, right? So if you're dumping in this huge list of keywords and have a high bid out there and you're not watching your daily budget, you could risk spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars within the first couple days to a term that's never been proven to you, right?
And you can really see that in that bid range and that page 1 bid, especially for those more competitive categories, health and supplements, for example. That tends to be a little dangerous for profitability, especially in the long term.
Right. So it looks like we've had a few people drop that 1 into the comments. So interesting to see that you've been using those tools. I think it's a place that a lot of people start.
Yeah.
So sort of pivoting from there a little bit. So after you've maybe done that process, got a huge list to start with, one of the other things that I encourage sellers to do, right off the bat is take advantage of the Amazon search bar.
Yeah.
Right? So it's definitely a lot more manual than, entering in a term and getting a big spreadsheet of hundreds of terms out of that. But it can really give you insight into what Amazon is suggesting and how people are searching. So that like autocomplete, if you're selling yoga mats, for example, type in yoga mat and before you hit enter, see what those suggestions are coming up with on the autocomplete. Think about it like you're using Google. And that data is how a lot of people are searching on Amazon, right?
I mean, it may not be a huge list either.
Right.
I mean, it may take, it's a longer process to go through and look at it, but it may not be too long of a list, and it can be, really beneficial to find, what is after a specific term that people are searching.
And it could give you some ideas for some negative keywords as well. And we'll get into, that's actually going to be our next episode next week, is talking a lot about negative keywords and how those can help your performance overall. But seeing how people are searching, I mean, I know when I'm looking for products on Amazon, I'll start typing and then I'll end up clicking something that's the suggested thing halfway down the list.
Yeah.
And that's really gives some good insight. So again, maybe not the most scalable solution, but some good insight into the Amazon suggestion and how people are searching.
Yeah, and using that with a broad matched keyword, you can actually capture what works well for your products there.
Yeah, great point.
Starting.
So the third piece here that that you can sort of think about as a strategy for discovering some keywords is around different channels. So yeah, if you're tuned in and you've done some advertising on Google or through Facebook, drop in a 3 there and let us know if that's something that you've done in the past. I'd be interested to see who on the live event here has experimented with other channels. And I see that as an opportunity to go both ways, right? To inform your Google advertising or your Facebook advertising what keywords are working best on Amazon. But if your .com site has existed for a long time and you've been selling there, that data, you shouldn't forget about it, right? You may have a long history of what's worked the best for you.
Yeah, and I've seen actually brands who do have their own .com, maybe on Shopify, for example. They pull that data from Google AdWords, try it in Amazon sponsored products, and find kind of what works well versus not, because they're different channels, and customers may be searching for more specific terms. You can always capture it that way. However, this is actually good. I've seen with a lot of sellers using it for seasonal trends as well.
Yeah.
So capturing that.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you will find that there's going to be different performance in different channels, because that Amazon customer is super qualified, like ready to buy, whereas they may be doing more just research if they're Googling a specific product.
Yeah, I mean, performance may not translate, but it's certainly an avenue that you should try and translate it over, and you'll be able to see what that performance is, and if it is consistent or if it's not.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Robbie's refreshing the feed for us. And thanks again to everyone who's joining us. Drop in a comment, let us know how you've been doing your keyword research or discovery, or any questions you have. If you're just getting started on Amazon, let us know where you're struggling with, and we can try to talk through that with you. So we've talked about those third-party tools. It looks like a couple sellers joining us today have used those before. Talked to you a little bit about using that Amazon search bar. Maybe more manual, but gives you some good insight. And then those other channels, taking advantage of any data you have in Google or Facebook. But I think the real winner here and where you're actually going to succeed is the search term report, right? So it's no surprise that we're bringing this up. I mean, this is something that we talk about not only when talking about keyword strategies, but across your sponsored products portfolio and all of your campaigns. This is the richest data you have access to.
Yeah, it's actually what the customer is searching in that search bar there. So if you're able to find what's actually working well for your products and you're able to capitalize on that, why not?
And that's the key, being able to see what's performing. You're going to get a list of everything being searched, and you can track and see how each individual term is performing and decide ultimately, what you can bring over.
Right. So it looks like we got some questions in from Carrie saying, what are your recommendations for generating keywords for thousands of SKUs in many different categories at once, rather than on a SKU by SKU or keyword by keyword basis? So great question. I think that's a perfect segue to using the search term report, and what we're talking about now is being able to actually use that automatic report and generate keywords from Amazon. Let Amazon do the heavy lifting, right?
Yeah.
So if you have thousands of products, you can break them out by category and objective, like we've talked about in the past around having that structure. But then when you set that automatic campaign, you don't have to worry about what keywords to bid on. With automatics, there's no keywords. Amazon is doing that work.
And that's where really what comes into play is your product details page. And you really want to have that optimized, because your automatic will only run as efficient as how relevant your search content is on the product page. So that's why we really emphasize, first starting with that content, letting your auto run, and then that should work really well in finding what works best for your product.
Yeah, I mean, I would be cautious around starting advertising if you're not yet buttoned up with your product page, right? If there's only one image and you can't zoom in and the title's just really short and not descriptive, you don't have any bullet points, don't set up your advertising yet.
The cost is going to be a little bit too much.
So once you do set up those automatic campaigns, using that data to then move those search terms over to manual that's how you succeed. You find those terms that work best for you and you move them over and are able to bid on them at that individual keyword level, rather than having that single bid for the entire automatic ad group.
And we actually just had a webinar last week, Joe and I, and we call that strategy explore and exploit. So exploring in the automatic, investing in that search term data, because that's the most richest there, and then exploiting them in the manual, because in our previous TeikaTVs, we've talked about match types and bidding, so really being able to control it there.
Yeah, it looks like a few more questions coming in. Do you put comma after your search terms and words? So no, you don't need to use a comma, and you may be speaking more specifically around the back-end listing, but no, there's no need to do a comma there. A great question in from Gary around how you can use the ASINs in your search term report. So an ASIN, what does that mean, Pat, when an ASIN is showing up?
So it essentially means you're advertising, somebody is on your listing, and they're clicking on an individual seller's ad, and it's showing up on your search term report, which allows you to spy on your competitors, if you will.
Right.
And you can use that ASIN to your advantage and figure out who that competitor is. Right. Figure out what they may have in their listings that may relate to you, or what you have that may relate to them that you may want to remove or add. Yeah,
it's a great source of data. So it's with those automatic campaigns, it's the only way to show up on your competitor product page. You can't do it manually. You can't bid on an ASIN, and you can't negate an ASIN.
It's a good question that we've got from a lot of sellers.
Yeah. But when you do show up, I mean, exactly to Pat's point, if it's working well for you, see what that competitor's title is. What are they using for their bullet points and description, and use that in your product listing or in your sponsored products. If there's a scenario where you see a lot of spend associated with a competitor ASIN, but you're not getting any conversions, I would ask myself, why? What's going on? Like, am I not priced competitively? Is their listing a lot better than mine? And what can I do to improve and be more competitive and get those? If I'm getting the clicks, why aren't I getting the orders?
Yeah.
So another question coming in, and please do, as they come up, drop in that comment. How about after research is complete, what is the best way to get title, bullet point, product descriptions, and back end together? I mean, I think that's an ongoing process. You're going to be continuously looking to optimize. If you find a new keyword that works particularly well with sponsored products, put it up in your title. Yeah. I mean, I would say your work is never done there. Yeah. And you always want to be continuing to improve.
Oh yeah, and search term data is even great to harvest that, and especially with the more limited back-end keywords, using that there.
Another question in, what's the max amount of words you put in search terms? So there's a limit in every ad group. You can put 1,000 keywords, but it's really not about volume. It's about the quality of that term. So you can sort of start with a larger list, but then begin focusing on those terms that work best for you. If I had to give you a number, I would say somewhere between 25 to 40 keywords in an ad group feels about right to me.
I don't think I've ever seen 1,000.
No, I mean, once you have hundreds, not all of them are going to get any impressions. A lot of the actual meat is going to come from maybe a dozen keywords.
We've actually come across some sellers who will just start to generate a bunch of keywords, putting them in their ad groups, just to try to get that visibility, but they're wasting a lot of money there. Yeah. So even with almost kind of keyword stuffing, it might not always work in their favor there.
Yeah, and one thing to think about too is you don't necessarily want to be generating clicks that won't result in an order. So if you're sending traffic to your page, but you're not getting that actual conversion, it's not a good sign in terms of your search rank, right? You're telling Amazon that people who click this item and land on your page aren't likely to buy, and that's not a good thing. So I would be cautious around sending huge amounts of volume on keywords. Not only is that going to be expensive for you because those clicks aren't turning into sales, but it's also sort of a negative marker on your listing to be seeing that amount of traffic with no sales.
And it's costing you money because you're paying per click, so that's really going to get expensive for you in the long run. But we typically see that just not being profitable for sellers.
Yeah. So Clark wrote in, I found a keyword that a competitor is #1 in. I want my listing to be strong on that word. What steps would you suggest? So, I mean, raise your bid, right? I mean, that's the step number one there is, you have to be, if you want to be in that #1 spot for competitive terms, it's going to be expensive. and you have to be willing to bid that amount and test it. I mean, I would look at it and sort of frame it and say, let's give it a week or 2 weeks. Be really aggressive on that term that I think is important to me, but make sure my daily budget's in place. That's something that I'm comfortable with, and let it run. But if it's something where you're driving that traffic and you're not getting those conversions, it's obviously not going to be sustainable in the long term.
And just because you want something to rank doesn't mean you're going to. Amazon's all about relevancy and showing what's most likely going to convert.
Right.
So like you said, you don't want to be hurting that conversion factor. So being more data-driven rather than emotional on a keyword is going to be really, really big here.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we're all about here, is arming you with that data. So, our sponsored products optimizer is going to be looking at those keywords that work best for you. It's going to be automatically adjusting those bids to make sure that you're always properly funded on those really successful terms, and it'll be dialing back the bids where you're not seeing the success. So again, Robbie will drop in the comments a link to that free 30-day trial. So if that's something you're interested in learning more about, please sign up and let us know. We'll be in touch with you. Some member of the team will reach out.
Risa, I'm seeing a comment here. She said, should I pay attention to the ACOS of my keywords?
Yes, I think you should, Risa. So should I pay attention to the ACOS of the search terms when I'm adding them as keywords? Absolutely. I think that's important to note, is just because something maybe in an automatic campaign has resulted in a couple sales, make sure you're also looking at how much you've spent on it, because
it's that sole indicator of is it performing.
Right.
You don't want to add something that is simply not performing, and that ACOS is that indicator.
Right.
Although typically when you're refining the match types, maybe adding that search term as a keyword, for example, it could be a little more efficient.
Right.
And it looks like there's another question. There are 5 boxes in Handmade for keywords. Do you fill those too? So that's, on the back end of your listings, definitely take advantage of all the fields that you have access to. The more you fill out there, the easier it is for people to find your products. But make sure you're always remaining compliant with the Amazon guidelines.
Oh yeah, and that's actually a good point, Joe. I know we were talking about this earlier, is putting your competitor brand names as keywords in sponsored products. And I've got a lot of questions about putting them in the back end as well.
Right.
And I've actually worked with a seller who was putting a competitor name in the back end, and Amazon reached out saying, that was violating the terms there. So being very careful.
And that was pretty courteous of Amazon to actually reach out and let them know, because we've also seen cases where a listing gets suspended, right? And there's no notification, and if you didn't log in and check on it, you'd check in a few days and see 0 sales and start panicking.
Could be your bestseller there, and that would be really unfortunate. So that brings us to competitor brand names for keywords. So how do you guys feel about those?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I'm thinking about keywords, I sort of will bucket them into a couple different buckets. I guess that's what you bucket things into, buckets, right? So I would think of my own brand, right? And typically if I'm a smaller brand, those are going to be the cheapest. Those are going to be terms that maybe, if I just started my own shirt company, Joe's Shirts, no one's going to be bidding on that term yet, right? Because no one knows about my brand. But I want to be sort of protected because, and see that sort of more of as an insurance policy so that no one else takes that spot. Because if I'm not bidding on it, my competitors could.
Yeah, and if you're bidding against your own competitor for your own brand name, you're going to most likely get that sale because someone's searching for you.
Right, so then we have, your own brand. You have those generic terms, which are just more like shirt, right? Men's shirt, men's dress shirt, all of those generic terms. That's where a majority of spend is in that generic bucket. But then, to Megan's point, you also have competitor brands. And while you can't put any competitors in your titles or your back end or any of your bullet points, you can be bidding on those competitors in sponsored products.
Yeah, I mean, it's the one thing they let you do, with your competitor, brand names. I mean, you can put it in there, and like Megan said earlier, it may not be the best in terms of performance. If someone's looking for a certain brand, they may go for that certain brand.
Sure.
But it is another way to get your product, if it's very similar, up there with your competitor.
And maybe you have a higher budget for those types of keywords because you're viewing it as like stealing a sale from someone else, right? I may be willing to say, I'm okay with a 50% ACOS against these competitor branded terms because any of those sales that I capture, I've stolen directly from a competitor. You know, imagine the power of that with Amazon, of being able to have someone type in a competitor brand name, they see your listing first, they click on that, and they end up checking out with your product. That's, I mean, the power of sponsored products is giving you that access that you would have never had organically.
And this is typically seen in categories where people aren't as brand loyal, I guess. They can shift back and forth. Maybe they're more price sensitive, for example, so you see that benefit there.
Absolutely. Looks like a couple more questions coming in. The people out there definitely want to see Robbie, our executive producer, so maybe we'll get him on a future episode. He's the brains behind the operation, and he made this all happen last week when we had no power. So that was pretty fun to be running all on batteries here. But luckily this week we're all plugged in and good to go. He preps us. And then Mike also asked a question. Do I need to think about my SP keywords differently than headline search keywords? So great question, and headline search is another powerful tool out there that Amazon released more recently. I think it was in August of this past year. And headline search is definitely higher in the marketing funnel, right? It's more about building your brand and letting people know what you have available on Amazon. So it's going to not be I'm not going to purchase right away, right? And have you set up any?
Yeah, so I've been working with some sellers who are using headline search ads, and what's been really beneficial is starting with sponsored products data. Finding what's really working there, because we can go ahead and utilize the different match types in HSA, and going off of that, you know, it's a different part of the funnel, so it might be as effective too.
Just also, excuse me, just had to steal some of Pat's water there. Looks like you got another question in. I've run ads for a product with limited keywords and a bid it as much higher than the average cost, but my ads still don't show up on the first couple pages. So it's not only about the bid, right? It's also about the relevancy and how Amazon is sort of grading your listing. So if it's a term that you're not super relevant for, no matter what your bid is, you're never going to show up.
Because Amazon's going to want to show that ad that's most likely to convert. So that's why you want to be bidding on what is converting, what's producing, you know, multiple orders there.
Awesome. Well, it looks like we're just about at the 30-minute mark. So want to do a quick recap of what we've talked about today. And then if there are any final questions, please do drop those in the comments section. So we've talked a lot about keywords today, right? Getting started, where's my source, what should I be looking for? Started with those third-party tools. So it sounded like a few people on the feed today have had some experience using those, and I think they're a good place to start and get you some ideas, right?
This is especially good for new sellers who don't have search term data. You know, people who are maybe looking for a product launch, just trying to get the visibility there.
Gets you that immediate traction. Right, kind of get you off the starting line.
Not profitable in the long run, and that's where you want to be utilizing more tailored strategies, maybe like search term data.
And then that second thing we talked about was taking advantage of the Amazon search bar as a tool. So it is really manual, but it can give you some good insight as how people are searching and what those next suggestions are from Amazon. Thirdly, we talked a little bit about using data from other channels. So if you have any Google data, any Facebook data, build that into Amazon, see what works, what doesn't.
And vice versa too, right?
Right, absolutely.
Sponsored products data into AdWords.
And then finally, we spent a majority of the second half of today talking through that customer search term report, because that's where the real data is, and looking at those automatic campaigns, seeing what search terms are most successful, moving them over to the manual side. And then once they are in manual, you can continue to look at that list, right? If you have a broad keyword out there, it can be served against thousands of search terms. So take a look at that. Don't just stop with manual keywords. Continue to refine that list and go from broad to phrase to exact, because that data is showing you at the search term level how everything is performing.
And we actually see a lot of sellers ask us, should I continue to run my automatic? Do I pause it once I found enough data? And like you said, customers are always searching for your products in different ways. So being able to capture that, especially with new trends coming out, you want to be able to bid on that more specifically in your manual.
Yeah, great insights, and thanks everyone for joining. Looks like there's a few final questions that we'll address before signing off. So we have one from Loretta asking, can Sponsored Products Optimizer be purchased on its own? Absolutely. So yeah, you can sign up for that free trial, and it's a monthly fee going forward. Also have one in there from Stephanie saying, we are a bracing brand, and we are constantly launching new products that aren't even in the market now. How would you move forward? Yeah, I mean, I would continue to leverage that data from Amazon. So setting up your listing and launching an automatic campaign, seeing what you're getting matched up with, and then starting with the handful of terms that you know are relevant to the products and see how they work.
Yep. And I like Clark's question as well. If you have a listing ranked well organically on the first page, would you still suggest doing a manual for that word? And I think this is a very common question that we get as well.
Yeah, so definitely. I recommend, there's so many challenges to Amazon as a seller, and it's so competitive that if you're not bidding on that, that placement is going to go to someone else.
Absolutely.
So even if you are there organically, I mean, I was searching for a product earlier today, and I noticed that there wasn't even an organic listing until I scrolled down. So there was the headline search placement, there were two specific sponsored products ads, and then finally, after I scrolled down, I saw the actual ad. So even if I rank high organically, people might not even get to the organic listings.
Yep. Just additional placement, because if you're not bidding on it, your competitor is.
And one last comment from Marco, shout out from Italy. So big thank you to us for joining. So thank you very much. And with that, we'll sign off for this week. So please do join us in the discussion next week. We'll keep this going every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And let us know what you want to hear more from. So next week, we'll be talking specifically about how to leverage negative keywords and drive down that ACOS so you get more efficient campaigns. So Megan, Pat, thank you. And thanks to everyone who joined.
Thanks, everyone.